Her stomach twisted with hunger as she stood trembling before the weathered cabin. 8-year-old Emma's last desperate gamble after 3 days alone in the Arizona desert. The words that tumbled from her cracked lips, "Can I clean your house for soup?" would shatter a decade of silence and forever bind two broken souls who had nothing left to lose but each other. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty road that cut through the reservation like an old scar. Heat waves shimmered off the cracked asphalt, distorting the horizon into a watery mirage that seemed to promise relief, but delivered only disappointment. In this unforgiving landscape, a small figure trudged forward, her shadow stretching long and thin against the baked earth. Emma Miller was 8 years old, though the weight in her eyes belonged to someone much older. Her blonde hair, unwashed for days, hung in limp strands around her dirt-streaked face. The pink backpack she carried, once bright and cheerful, was now coated with a layer of dust, much like its owner. Inside were her only possessions: a tattered teddy bear missing one eye, a water bottle half full of lukewarm water, and a dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web that Mrs. Henderson from her second foster home had given her. 3 days. That's how long she'd been walking since slipping out the back door of the Petersons' house, her 4th foster home in 2 years. 3 days of scavenging food from dumpsters behind gas stations, drinking from garden hoses when no one was looking, and sleeping beneath highway overpasses with her backpack clutched to her chest like a shield. "Just keep walking," she whispered to herself, her voice raspy from thirst. "Something good will happen. It has to." Emma had learned early that adults couldn't be trusted with her hope. Her mother had disappeared when she was 4, leaving nothing but the lingering scent of cigarettes and cheap perfume. Her father had been a shadow figure, in and out of jail, until the state finally decided Emma deserved better. But better had proven elusive, a carousel of temporary homes and provisional love that left her wary and watchful. So she had chosen the road instead, following an instinct as old as childhood itself. When things get bad, run. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, Emma's steps faltered. Her stomach cramped painfully, reminding her that the half-eaten bag of chips she'd found that morning had been woefully inadequate. The reservation stretched around her, vast and indifferent to her plight. She had heard stories about the Apache land, mostly warnings from foster parents about staying away, but desperation had driven her past the boundary markers, seeking any shelter from the relentless elements. That's when she saw it. A small cabin set back from the road, partially hidden among scrubby pine trees. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, promising warmth and perhaps, if luck was finally on her side, food. Emma hesitated, weighing hunger against caution. The cabin looked weathered but well kept, with a small garden patch beside it and a porch swing that creaked gently in the evening breeze. It didn't look threatening, but Emma had learned that danger often wore a benign face. Her stomach made the decision for her, cramping so sharply that she doubled over. Clutching her middle, she stumbled toward the cabin, each step a negotiation between fear and necessity. On the other side of that wooden door, Maria Crow Feather moved silently through her daily routine. At 67, her body had begun the slow rebellion against time, but her hands remained sure as she stirred the pot of soup simmering on her wood-burning stove. Her long silver hair, braided down her back, swayed slightly with each deliberate movement. Maria had not spoken a single word to another human being in 10 years. Not since the day she identified the bodies of her daughter and granddaughter after the semi-truck crossed the center line on Highway 60. The grief had sealed her lips as surely as if they had been stitched shut, trapping her voice deep inside where it could not betray the magnitude of her loss. The people on the reservation understood, or at least they had learned to. They left her alone, occasionally leaving supplies on her porch, but never expecting acknowledgement. In return, Maria left bundles of her healing herbs where they could be found. It was a silent commerce of necessity, requiring no words. She was just reaching for her carved wooden bowl when the knock came, tentative, so faint she almost believed she had imagined it. Maria froze, wooden spoon suspended above the pot. No one knocked on her door, not anymore. The sound came again, slightly stronger this time. Maria moved to the window, pulling back the faded curtain just enough to see the porch. What she saw stopped the breath in her chest. A child, small and bedraggled, swaying slightly on her feet, as if it took all her strength to remain upright. For the first time in a decade, Maria felt words rise to her throat like startled birds. She swallowed them back, her hand trembling against the curtain. The girl knocked a third time, then seemed to gather herself. Maria watched as the child straightened her thin shoulders and rehearsed something under her breath, her chapped lips moving silently. Maria should walk away, return to her soup, to her silence. To the careful fortress of solitude she had built around her broken heart. Instead, she found herself moving toward the door, her moccasins soundless against the wooden floor. The door opened with a reluctant creak, and Emma took an instinctive step back. Standing in the doorway was a woman unlike any Emma had ever seen. Tall and straight-backed despite her years, with deep lines etched into copper skin that told stories of both joy and sorrow. Her eyes, dark as midnight, seemed to look straight through Emma's dirt-smudged facade into something deeper. Emma felt exposed, as if this stranger could see every foster home she'd fled, every night she'd cried herself to sleep, every moment she'd pretended to be invisible to avoid another adult's irritation. For a long moment, neither spoke. The woman made no move to close the door, but neither did she invite Emma in. She simply waited, her gaze steady and unreadable. Emma had rehearsed this moment on her long walk up to the cabin, practicing the words she would say to whoever answered. But now, faced with this silent, imposing figure, her carefully prepared speech abandoned her. Instead, her stomach spoke for her, letting out an embarrassingly loud growl that seemed to echo in the stillness between them. The woman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those obsidian eyes, recognition, perhaps. Of what? Emma couldn't tell. Swallowing hard, Emma gathered her courage and blurted out the only thing she could think of. "Can I clean your house for soup?" Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying both her thirst and her desperation. She gestured weakly at the cabin behind the woman. "I can sweep or wash dishes or pull weeds. I'm good at being quiet. No one will know I was here." The skills she offered were the currency she had learned at the Petersons, her usefulness as measured by chores completed and silence maintained. Mrs. Peterson had valued both above all else, often reminding Emma that children should be seen cleaning, not heard complaining. The woman at the door remained motionless, her face a mask of neutrality. But her eyes traveled over Emma's thin frame, taking in the dirty clothes, the cracked lips, the slight tremor in her small hands. Something shifted in her posture. Not a softening, exactly, but a subtle change, like a door being unlocked but not yet opened. Without a word, the woman stepped aside, creating just enough space for Emma to enter if she chose. Emma hesitated. Every instinct honed by years in the system told her to be wary of easy acceptance, but the aroma wafting from inside the cabin, rich and savory, made her decision for her. She slipped past the woman, careful not to brush against her. and entered the small, neat space beyond. The interior of the cabin was simple but warm. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, and bundles of dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams, filling the air with an earthy, pleasant scent that mingled with the smell of cooking food. A rocking chair with a colorful woven blanket sat near the fire, and bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes whose spines Emma couldn't read from where she stood. But it was the pot on the wood-burning stove that captured Emma's full attention. Steam rose from it in fragrant clouds, and the sound of gently bubbling liquid was the most beautiful music Emma had ever heard. The woman closed the door and moved past Emma to the stove. From a hook on the wall, she took down a wooden bowl, carved with intricate patterns around its rim. She ladled soup into it, a rich stew with chunks of vegetables and what looked like venison, then placed it on a small table near the fire. Beside it, she set a spoon and a thick slice of bread that she produced from a cloth-covered basket. Then she stepped back and nodded once at Emma, a clear invitation. Emma approached the table cautiously, half expecting the food to be snatched away as some cruel joke. When nothing happened, she sat on the edge of a wooden chair and picked up the spoon with a trembling hand. The first spoonful nearly undid her. The warmth spread through her hollow stomach like a blessing, and the flavors, complex and comforting, brought sudden, unexpected tears to her eyes. She tried to hide them, ducking her head low over the bowl, but they fell anyway, splashing silently into her soup. Across the room, Maria watched the child eat. 10 years of silence had made her an observer of life rather than a participant, and now she observed this small, wounded creature with the detached interest of someone who has stepped outside the circle of human connection. Yet something about the girl's transparent need pierced the careful numbness Maria had cultivated. The way she ate, quickly but with evident care not to spill a drop, spoke of hunger beyond the physical. Maria recognized it because she had seen it in her own granddaughter's eyes when Lily first came to live with her after Sarah's divorce. The hunger to belong somewhere, to someone. Emma finished the soup and used the bread to wipe the bowl clean. Only then did she look up at the woman who remained standing, still and watchful as a desert hawk. "Thank you," Emma said softly. "That was the best soup I ever had." She stood, suddenly uncertain. "I'll clean now. Where's your broom?" Maria felt the words rise again, pressing against the barrier of years. This time she didn't swallow them back. They emerged rusty and rough, like a door opening on ancient hinges. "You can stay." 3 words, simple, direct. The first she had spoken in a decade, and they surprised her as much as they surprised the girl, whose eyes widened in shock or fear. Maria couldn't tell which. Emma froze, her backpack half raised from the floor where she had placed it. "Stay," she echoed, as if the word itself was foreign to her. "For how long?" Maria's throat felt raw, unused to the passage of words, but she forced 3 more past her lips. "As long as necessary." Emma stood frozen, the backpack dangling from her fingers. Her mind raced to process the woman's words. "As long as necessary." What did that mean? In her experience, adults' definitions of necessary rarely aligned with her own. Mrs. Peterson had decided it was necessary to lock the pantry after 7 p.m. Her second foster father had deemed it necessary to check her backpack every day after school, as if she were hiding contraband instead of homework and drawings. "I don't want to be trouble," Emma said finally, her voice small. The soup sat warm in her belly, but anxiety crawled up her spine. Nothing was ever truly free. She had learned that lesson repeatedly. Maria regarded the child with steady eyes. 10 years of silence had made her an observer of the world rather than a participant. and she saw clearly the wariness in the girl's stance, the way she positioned herself for a quick exit, like a young deer ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Maria moved slowly to the rocking chair by the fire and lowered herself into it. The familiar creaking of the wood seemed loud in the quiet room. She gestured to a small footstool nearby, an invitation for Emma to sit. Emma hesitated, then perched on the edge of the stool, her backpack clutched protectively in her lap. Up close, Maria could see the dark shadows beneath the girl's eyes, the small scrape on her chin, the way her clothes hung loose on her thin frame. "Where are your people?" Maria asked, her voice still rough from disuse. Emma stiffened. "I don't have any." Her chin lifted slightly, a gesture of defiance that reminded Maria so much of Sarah at that age that it sent a physical pain through her chest. "The Petersons were just fostering me." "They didn't want me anyway." Maria nodded once, accepting this information without judgment. "And now you walk alone." It wasn't a question, but Emma answered anyway. "I'm good at being alone." The words held a practiced confidence that her trembling hands betrayed. Maria said nothing for a long time, simply rocking gently, the firelight playing across her lined face. Emma watched her warily, waiting for the questions that always came. "Why did you run away? Don't you know it's dangerous? What's wrong with you that no one wants to keep you?" But the questions didn't come. Instead, Maria rose and crossed to a small closet near the back of the cabin. From it, she withdrew a folded blanket, soft and patterned with geometric designs in warm earth tones. She brought it to Emma and held it out. "The night comes cold in the desert," she said. Emma took the blanket, her fingers brushing against Maria's weathered hand. The unexpected kindness brought a lump to her throat, and she looked down quickly, pretending to examine the blanket's pattern to hide her emotion. "Thank you," she managed finally. Maria nodded again and went to the stove, where she began to prepare a pot of tea. The familiar ritual of measuring herbs from small jars, boiling water, and warming the ceramic pot gave her time to consider the strange turn her day had taken. 10 years of solitude, of days flowing one into another like water over smooth stones. And now this, a child with wary eyes and a heart clearly accustomed to disappointment. Maria had not planned to speak today, or any day. After the accident, words had seemed not just unnecessary but impossible, as if the very mechanism of speech had been crushed along with her daughter's car. The reservation doctor had called it traumatic mutism, a clinical term for a wound too deep for sound to escape. Yet here she was, making tea for a runaway child and forming words that scraped against her throat like sand. Emma watched the woman's movements with fascination. There was something almost ceremonial in the way she prepared the tea, her hands moving with the certainty of long practice. It reminded Emma of Mrs. Henderson, who had taught 4th grade before becoming a foster parent and who approached each task, from making breakfast to grading papers, with deliberate attention. Mrs. Henderson had been kind in her distracted way. She had given Emma books and told her she was smart. But then her husband got sick, and there was no room for a foster child amid the hospital visits and mounting medical bills. Emma had been moved to the Jacksons' house, where kindness was in shorter supply. The memory tightened Emma's grip on her backpack. She shouldn't get comfortable here. Shouldn't start thinking that this silent woman with her soup and blankets and tea meant any more than a temporary reprieve from the road. Maria brought 2 mugs of tea to the small table. Steam rose from them in delicate spirals, carrying a scent that was both floral and earthy. She set one in front of Emma. "Drink," she said. "It will help you sleep." Emma took a cautious sip. The tea was unlike anything she had tasted before, complex and slightly sweet, with a hint of something that tingled pleasantly on her tongue. "What is it?" she asked. "Desert sage, wild mint." "Honey from my bees." Maria's speech was becoming more fluid, as if each word spoken made the next easier to form. "You have bees!" Emma's eyes widened with interest. Maria nodded. "Behind the cabin, in white boxes. I've never seen a real beehive before," Emma said. "Just pictures in books." "Tomorrow," Maria said, and the simple promise hung in the air between them. Emma felt her eyelids growing heavy, whether from the tea or the exhaustion of 3 days on the road. She couldn't tell. She fought against it, blinking rapidly. Falling asleep meant vulnerability, meant letting down her guard in a stranger's house. Maria saw the struggle and recognized it. "The couch," she said, pointing to a small sofa against the wall, covered with another woven blanket. "You sleep there. I will be in the next room." Emma wanted to protest, to insist that she could sleep on the floor or even outside, to not impose further. But her body betrayed her with a wide yawn that she couldn't suppress. "Just for tonight," she said, as much to herself as to Maria. Maria didn't contradict her. She simply gathered a pillow from a trunk and placed it at one end of the couch. Then she added another log to the fire, filling the room with a soft, dancing light. "Rest now," she said, and moved toward her bedroom door. Emma waited until the door closed before climbing onto the couch. She arranged the blanket over herself, positioning her backpack where she could feel its reassuring weight against her side. The pillow smelled of herbs and sunshine, as if it had been dried outdoors. Despite her best intentions to stay alert, to keep watch, Emma felt herself sliding towards sleep, pulled down by the weight of exhaustion, the warmth of the fire, and the novel feeling of safety that had settled over her like the soft blanket. Emma woke to unfamiliar sounds, the soft clink of metal against metal, the whisper of a broom against wooden floorboards, the melodic call of a bird she couldn't name. For a moment, panic seized her as she struggled to remember where she was. Not the Petersons' house with its perpetual smell of disinfectant, not the group home before that, where nighttime had meant whispered conversations and muffled crying. Then her eyes fell on the dancing patterns of light across the ceiling, reflections from a copper pot hanging near the window, and memory returned. The cabin, the Apache woman, soup and tea, and unexpected sanctuary. Emma sat up slowly, still clutching her backpack. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny stars. The fire had burned down to embers, but the cabin was warm with morning light. Maria stood at the stove, her back to Emma, stirring something in a cast-iron skillet. Her long silver braid hung down her back, swaying slightly with her movements. She wore the same simple dress as yesterday, but had added a shawl of deep russet that draped over her shoulders like autumn leaves. As if sensing Emma's gaze, Maria turned. Their eyes met, and Emma felt a flutter of uncertainty. In the harsh light of morning, would the woman regret her offer of shelter? Would she send Emma back to the road with nothing but a meal in her belly and the memory of one night's kindness? But Maria simply nodded once in greeting and returned her attention to the skillet. No words, but no dismissal either. Emma rose from the couch, folding the blanket carefully and placing it at the foot of her makeshift bed. Her clothes felt stiff with dirt, and she ran a self-conscious hand through her tangled hair. Mrs. Peterson had always made a point of commenting on Emma's appearance. "Goodness, child, you look like something the cat dragged in." But Maria seemed unconcerned with such matters. "Good morning," Emma ventured, her voice small in the quiet room. Maria glanced over her shoulder. "Morning," she replied, the word coming easier than it had last night. She gestured toward a door at the back of the cabin. Water there. For washing. Emma followed the direction of her hand to a small bathroom. Inside, she found a basin filled with clean water, a bar of soap that smelled of pine, and a folded washcloth. The simple provisions felt like luxury after days on the road. She washed quickly, scrubbing her face and hands until her skin tingled. There was no mirror, which was just as well. Emma had no desire to see the evidence of her journey written on her face. When she returned to the main room, Maria was setting 2 plates on the table. Each held a portion of what looked like cornmeal cakes, golden brown and steaming. Beside them sat a jar of amber honey. "Sit," Maria said, and Emma obeyed, sliding onto the wooden chair with its woven seat. The cornmeal cakes tasted nutty and slightly sweet, especially when drizzled with honey. Emma ate slowly, savoring each bite, watching Maria from beneath lowered lashes. In daylight, she could see more clearly the lines that age and hardship had etched into the woman's face. Yet there was a dignity to her features, a quiet strength that reminded Emma of ancient trees that had weathered countless storms. "Thank you," Emma said when she had finished, "for the food. And for letting me stay last night." Maria acknowledged her thanks. With a slight incline of her head, she gathered the empty plates and placed them in a basin of water near the sink. "You promised to show me the bees," Emma said, then winced at her own boldness. "I mean, if you still want to." Maria dried her hands on a cloth and regarded Emma thoughtfully. "Yes," she said, finally. "The bees." She moved to a shelf and took down a wide-brimmed hat with a veil of fine mesh that hung down all around it. She handed it to Emma. "For protection," she explained. "Bees know me. They don't know you yet." Emma took the hat, turning it in her hands with fascination. "Won't they sting you?" she asked. A faint smile, the first Emma had seen, touched the corners of Maria's mouth. "Sometimes," she said. "Small pain. Worth the honey." She led Emma outside, around the back of the cabin where the land sloped gently toward a shallow ravine. The morning air was already warming, but still held the coolness of night in its depths. Emma breathed deeply, savoring the scents of pine and sage and sun-warmed earth. Against the backdrop of scrubby trees stood 3 white wooden boxes, stacked like small towers. As they approached, Emma could see bees coming and going, their bodies glinting gold in the sunlight as they flew purposefully between the hives and the wildflowers that dotted the landscape. Maria moved with unhurried confidence, stopping a few yards from the nearest hive. She made a soft humming sound deep in her throat, not quite a song, but a vibration that seemed to harmonize with the buzzing of the bees. "Did they know your voice?" Emma asked, keeping her own voice low. "They know my spirit," Maria corrected. "Bees see beyond skin, beyond words. They know intent." Emma pondered this as she watched Maria approach the hives. The woman moved with the deliberate grace of someone performing a ritual, each gesture measured and meaningful. She lifted the top of one hive, exposing frames filled with honeycomb. Bees swarmed around her hands, but she showed no fear, no hesitation. "They're not stinging you," Emma observed, keeping a safe distance despite the protective hat. "We have an understanding," Maria said, her voice carrying easily in the still morning air. "I provide home. They provide honey. We respect each other's work." She carefully removed a frame heavy with honeycomb and held it up for Emma to see. Golden honey glistened in the cells, catching the light like amber jewels. "Life's sweetness," Maria said, "made from flowers that bloom after winter. From hardship comes beauty, if you know how to look." Emma wasn't sure if the woman was talking about honey anymore or something deeper, but the words settled into her heart like seeds finding soil. As they walked back to the cabin, frame of honeycomb carefully balanced in Maria's steady hands, Emma spotted a vehicle in the distance, a sheriff's patrol car moving slowly along the main road that cut through the reservation. Maria saw it too. Her posture stiffened almost imperceptibly, and she quickened her pace toward the cabin. "Are they looking for me?" Emma asked, fear clutching at her throat. Maria didn't answer directly. "Inside," she said instead, her tone brooking no argument. Once in the cabin, Maria set the honeycomb frame on the table and closed the door firmly. She moved to the window and watched as the patrol car continued down the road, eventually disappearing around a bend. "They will come," she said finally, turning to face Emma. "People always search for what is lost." Emma's hands twisted the fabric of her shirt. "I'm not lost," she protested. "I left. There's a difference." Maria's gaze was steady, assessing, "Why did you leave?" The question hung in the air between them, direct and unavoidable. Emma looked down at her worn sneakers, scuffed and dirty from her journey. "The Petersons didn't want me," she said finally. "Not really. They wanted the check that came with me, but they made sure I knew I wasn't really part of their family." Her voice grew smaller. "Mrs. Peterson said I was too quiet, too strange, that I didn't fit." She didn't mention the locked pantry or how Mrs. Peterson had thrown away the drawing Emma had made for her birthday, claiming it was creepy. She didn't speak of how Mr. Peterson had begun to drink more heavily after losing his job, or how his eyes followed her in a way that made her skin crawl. But perhaps something of these unspoken truths showed in her face, because Maria's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "People who cannot see your worth," she said, her words measured and precise, "are blind to their own poverty." The days began to establish their own rhythm, as natural and unforced as the rising and setting of the sun. Each morning, Emma woke to find Maria already up, moving quietly through her routines, stoking the fire, preparing a simple breakfast, tending to the small garden that provided much of their food. Each evening, they shared a meal at the wooden table, their conversation growing from sparse sentences to fuller exchanges as Maria's voice regained its strength and Emma's trust cautiously unfurled. On the fourth day, while helping Maria harvest late summer tomatoes from the garden, Emma finally asked the question that had been forming in her mind. "Why didn't you talk before I came? I mean..." Maria's hands stilled momentarily on the vine she was tending. The silence stretched long enough that Emma began to regret her boldness. She had learned in foster care that some questions were forbidden, marked by closed doors and changed subjects. But then Maria straightened, brushing soil from her fingers, and met Emma's gaze directly. "Words could not hold what I felt," she said simply. "After Sarah and Lily died." Emma's breath caught. Sarah and Lily. "My daughter, my granddaughter." Maria's voice remained steady, but Emma saw the slight tremor in her hands as she reached for another ripe tomato. "Car accident. 10 years ago." Emma absorbed this information quietly, recognizing the immense weight contained in those few words. Death was no stranger to her. Her own mother might be dead for all she knew, but the specificity of Maria's loss felt different, more concrete, more real. "How old was Lily?" she asked softly. 7, Maria replied, "like spring rain, quick to laugh, quick to forgive." She placed the tomato carefully in the basket between them. "She had your eyes, not the color, the way they see." Emma wasn't sure what Maria meant by that, but the comparison created a warm feeling in her chest. "I'm sorry they died," she said, the words inadequate but sincere. Maria nodded once, acknowledging both the sympathy and its limitations. Life continues, she said. Even when we wish it would stop. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the soft thud of ripe tomatoes being placed in the basket and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Emma snuck glances at Maria, seeing her anew with this knowledge, not just a woman who had offered shelter, but someone who had lost what Emma had never had, a family, a place of belonging. "Is that why you live alone?" Emma asked finally. "Because of Sarah and Lily." Maria straightened again, gazing out toward the distant mountains that shimmered in the heat. "Before," she said, "I was teacher at the reservation school. I taught our language, our stories. After," she made a gesture that encompassed the cabin, the garden, the solitary life she had built. "Words became stones in my throat. People became shadows. I walked away." Emma tried to imagine it, walking away from everything familiar, choosing silence and solitude over connection. It wasn't so different from what she had done in leaving the Petersons, except Maria had been running from grief rather than mistreatment. "But you talked to me," Emma said, the realization dawning on her fully for the first time. "You let me stay." Maria's gaze returned to Emma, her dark eyes unreadable. "Yes," she said simply. The word hung between them, neither an explanation nor a deflection, just an acknowledgement of a fact that neither fully understood but both recognized as significant. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the distant sound of a vehicle laboring up the dusty road that led to the cabin. Maria tensed, then moved swiftly toward the house, gesturing for Emma to follow. "Inside," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Stay away from windows." Emma's heart began to race as she scurried after Maria, the basket of tomatoes forgotten on the ground. Through the cabin's front window, she caught a glimpse of a police cruiser, different from the one they had seen days ago. This one had Navajo County Sheriff emblazoned on its side. "They're looking for me," Emma whispered, panic rising in her chest. Maria shook her head. "Closet," she said, pointing to the small storage space where she kept extra blankets. "Quick now." Emma slipped inside, pulling her knees to her chest in the small, dark space. Through the slats in the door, she could see Maria smoothing her dress and moving toward the front entrance just as a knock sounded. From her hiding place, Emma could hear the conversation clearly. A man's voice, official but not unkind, explained that they were searching for a missing child. Female, 8 years old, blonde hair, last seen near the reservation border 4 days ago. "Run away from foster care," the officer said. "Name's Emma Miller. We're checking all residences in the area." Maria's response was calm, her words measured. "No child here," she said. "Only me." "Mind if I take a look around, ma'am?" the officer asked. Standard procedure in these cases. Emma held her breath, pressing herself further back into the darkness of the closet. She had been found before, after previous attempts to run away. Each time, the discovery had meant a return to the system, sometimes to the same home, sometimes to a new one, but always back to the feeling of being an unwanted obligation. "You have paper?" Maria was asking, her tone neutral. "Official paper that says you can enter my home." A pause. Then, "No, ma'am, but we're concerned for the child's safety. She's been missing for days, and with this heat." "I understand concern," Maria replied, "but this is Apache land. We have rules too." Another pause, longer this time. Emma could imagine the officer weighing his options, calculating the effort required to obtain a warrant against the likelihood of finding one small runaway in this remote cabin. "All right," he said finally, "but if you do see her or hear anything, Please contact the sheriff's office immediately. This child needs proper care." "All children need proper care," Maria agreed, and Emma heard in her voice a subtle emphasis that the officer likely missed. The sound of retreating footsteps, then the crunch of gravel as the cruiser turned around and headed back down the road. Still, Emma remained frozen in her hiding place, afraid to emerge until she felt Maria's gentle hand on the closet door. "They are gone," Maria said softly. "You can come out now." Emma unfolded herself from the cramped space, her legs tingling as circulation returned. She looked up at Maria, confusion and gratitude warring within her. "You lied for me," she said, wonderment in her voice. "Why?" Maria regarded her steadily. "I did not lie. I said no child is here. I see before me a strong young woman who makes her own choices." The distinction was subtle but profound, and Emma felt its impact like a physical touch. No one had ever spoken of her that way before, as someone capable of agency, of decision, of self-determination. "But they'll keep looking," Emma said, reality intruding on the moment. "And if they find me here, you could get in trouble." Maria shrugged slightly, a gesture that seemed to dismiss the entire apparatus of law enforcement as inconsequential. "Life is trouble," she said. "And the question is, what trouble has meaning?" She moved to the stove, where a pot of soup had been simmering all morning, filling the cabin with its rich aroma. As she stirred it slowly, she added, "Tomorrow is herb gathering day. There is basket for you, if you wish to learn." The offer was presented casually, as if they were discussing any ordinary activity and not making plans that defied the authorities actively searching for Emma. As if Maria's protection was a simple fact rather than an extraordinary act of defiance. Emma felt something unfamiliar expand in her chest, a feeling too fragile to name but too powerful to ignore. It might have been hope, or perhaps the first tentative recognition of what it meant to be truly seen by another person. "I'd like that," she said softly, "to learn about the herbs." Maria nodded once, satisfied. "Then we will go when sun is highest." The sage is ready for gathering. Outside, dust settled on the road where the sheriff's cruiser had passed. Inside, two souls, one young and wounded, one old and healing, continued the delicate dance of finding each other across the chasms of their separate sorrows. The sun had reached its zenith, casting minimal shadows as Maria and Emma made their way up a narrow trail that wound through scrubby pine and juniper. Each carried a basket woven from yucca fibers, Maria's worn smooth by years of use, Emma's newly made and still stiff. The previous evening, Maria had shown Emma how to prepare the fibers, soaking them until they became pliable, then weaving them into a simple but sturdy container. "Watch where I step," Maria instructed as they climbed. "Snake time. They seek warm rocks." Emma placed her feet carefully, mimicking Maria's deliberate gait. The heat pressed down on them like a physical weight, but Maria seemed unbothered, moving steadily despite her years. Emma's shirt clung to her back with sweat, and she was grateful for the wide-brimmed hat Maria had insisted she wear. "How do you know which plants to pick?" Emma asked, catching her breath as they paused in a small clearing. Maria surveyed the landscape with practiced eyes. Each plant has purpose. Some heal body, some heal spirit. Some protect, some cleanse. She pointed to a low-growing plant with silvery green leaves. White sage, very powerful, used for cleansing, for prayer. She knelt beside the plant, placing her hand gently on the earth beside it. Her lips moved in what Emma realized was a quiet prayer or acknowledgement. Then, with a small knife, she cut several stems, carefully placing them in her basket. "You speak to the plants?" Emma asked, fascinated. "And I thank them," Maria corrected, "for their gift." She looked up at Emma, her dark eyes serious. "We do not take without giving back. This is balance." She gestured for Emma to try, indicating another sage plant nearby. Emma knelt awkwardly, feeling self-conscious but determined. She placed her hand on the warm earth, closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them and looked at the plant. Thank you," she whispered, feeling both foolish and strangely moved. With Maria's knife, she carefully cut several stems, as she had seen the older woman do. Maria nodded approval. "Good. The plant feels your respect." They moved through the landscape slowly, Maria identifying plants and explaining their uses. Juniper berries for kidney ailments, yucca root for inflammation, prickly pear for diabetes. Each had its season, its proper time for harvesting, its specific preparation. Emma listened intently, absorbing not just the information, but the way Maria engaged with the natural world, not as something to be conquered or exploited, but as a community of beings deserving of respect and reciprocity. "My mother knew none of this," Emma said, as they rested in the shade of a large pine, sharing water from Maria's canteen. She said plants were just decorations. Maria made a small sound, part dismissal, part acknowledgement of Emma's loss. "Many have forgotten old ways," she said. "They see with blind eyes, hear with deaf ears." "Did you teach Sarah about plants?" Emma asked, then immediately worried she had crossed a boundary by mentioning Maria's daughter. But Maria nodded, her expression softening with memory. "Yes." Sarah learned all plants, all stories. A shadow passed over her face. "But she married man who had no use for old ways. He took her to city. She became nurse, white man's medicine." "Was that bad?" Emma asked, genuinely curious. Maria considered this, her weathered hands arranging the herbs in her basket with unconscious precision. "Not bad, different path. She helped many people." She looked out toward the distant horizon, where heat waves shimmered above the desert floor. "But she lost connection to land, to ancestors. This made hole in her spirit." Emma thought about this as they resumed their gathering. She had never considered that a person could have a connection to land, to a specific place. Her own life had been a series of temporary accommodations, foster homes, group facilities, brief stays with relatives who couldn't or wouldn't keep her. The idea of belonging somewhere, of having roots as tangible as the plants they gathered, was both foreign and deeply appealing. They had been out for perhaps 2 hours when Maria suddenly stiffened, her head tilting slightly as if listening. Emma froze, scanning the area for snakes or other dangers. "What is it?" she whispered. "Truck," Maria said, gesturing back toward the direction of her cabin. "Coming up road." Emma couldn't hear anything yet, but she didn't doubt Maria's senses. "The sheriff again." Maria shook her head. "Different sound. Come." "We go another way." She led Emma along a less visible path that skirted the ridge, eventually bringing them to a point where they could observe the cabin from above while remaining hidden among the trees. From this vantage, Emma could see a battered blue pickup truck parked in front of Maria's home. A man stood beside it, tall and lean, with long black hair pulled back in a ponytail. He wore jeans and a work shirt and appeared to be looking around with the casual air of someone familiar with the place. "Who is that?" Emma asked, her voice hushed despite the distance. "Thomas Redhawk," Maria replied. "My nephew, Sarah's cousin's son." The man called out something that Emma couldn't hear, then walked around to the back of the cabin, apparently checking if Maria was in the garden. "Does he visit often?" Emma asked, anxiety tightening her chest. Another person who might discover her presence, who might report her to the authorities. Sometimes, Maria said, brings supplies, checks if I need help. She glanced at Emma. He is good man, teacher at reservation school. Thomas had returned to the front of the cabin and was now sitting on the porch steps, clearly settling in to wait. Emma bit her lip, uncertain. Will you tell him about me? She asked. Maria was quiet for a long moment, considering Thomas knows reservation ways. She said finally, understands sanctuary, but choice is yours. We can wait until he leaves, or we can go down. Emma weighed her options. On one hand, every new person who knew about her increased the risk of discovery. On the other, hiding up here might mean hours in the hot sun, and her water bottle was nearly empty. Do you trust him? She asked Maria. The older woman nodded without hesitation. With my life. Emma took a deep breath. Okay, we can go down. They descended carefully, Maria leading the way with sure steps despite the steep terrain. When they emerged from the tree line, Thomas spotted them immediately, rising from the steps with a wave. As they approached, Emma could see that he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps in his early 30s, with a face that combined sharp angles and gentle eyes. "Aunt Maria," he called, then stopped abruptly when he noticed Emma trailing behind. His expression shifted from surprise to careful neutrality, a look Emma recognized from social workers trying not to spook a traumatized child. Maria greeted him in Apache, a rapid flow of words that Emma couldn't follow. Thomas responded in kind, his eyes occasionally flicking to Emma as they spoke. Emma stood awkwardly, clutching her basket of herbs and trying not to appear as anxious as she felt. Finally, Maria switched to English. "Thomas, this is Emma. She helps me gather herbs." Thomas extended his hand with deliberate casualness. "Hello, Emma." "I'm Thomas." Emma shook his hand briefly, noting the calluses on his palm. "Hi," she managed, her voice smaller than she intended. "Emma is staying with me," Maria continued, her tone matter-of-fact. "Learning old ways." Thomas's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "That's good. That's..." Not many young people interested in traditional knowledge these days. He smiled at Emma, and something in his eyes, a depth of understanding perhaps, made her feel slightly less exposed. "Come," Maria said, gesturing toward the cabin. "We make tea. Talk inside." As they entered the cabin, Thomas carried in several bags of groceries from his truck: flour, coffee, salt, and other staples that were difficult for Maria to transport without a vehicle. Emma helped put them away, acutely aware of Thomas watching her with quiet assessment. Once they were seated with mugs of herbal tea, Thomas spoke directly to Emma. "Sheriff's Department is looking for a girl matching your description," he said, his voice gentle but direct. "They've been asking questions all over the reservation." Emma's hands tightened around her mug. "I ran away," she admitted. From my foster home." Thomas nodded, unsurprised. "I figured it was something like that." He glanced at Maria, then back to Emma. "Are you safe here? With my aunt?" The question was unexpected, not, "Should you go back?" or "Why did you run?" but a simple concern for her well-being in her current situation. Emma felt a lump form in her throat at the kindness of it. "Yes," she said firmly. "Maria has been very good to me." Thomas seemed to accept this without reservation. He turned to Maria and said something in Apache that made her smile faintly and respond with a single word. "What did you say?" Emma asked, curiosity momentarily overcoming her caution. Thomas's expression was warm. "I said that perhaps the spirits sent you to each other." He sipped his tea, then added, "Aunt Maria hasn't spoken to anyone in 10 years, not since Sarah and Lily died. Yet here she is, talking with you as if silence never claimed her. I didn't know I was the first, Emma said, glancing at Maria with new understanding. She spoke to me the first night I came. That, said Thomas, setting down his mug with deliberate care, is very significant. Thomas stayed for dinner, helping Maria prepare a stew of rabbit and wild onions, while Emma set the table with the mismatched plates and utensils that filled Maria's cupboards. The conversation flowed easier than Emma had expected, with Thomas asking her questions about books she liked to read and subjects she enjoyed in school, carefully avoiding any mention of foster care or her life before arriving at the cabin. As they ate, Thomas shared stories of the reservation school, where he taught history and language to children from kindergarten through 8th grade. His face lit up when he described how his students were creating a digital archive of Apache stories, recording elders' voices to preserve both the tales and the proper pronunciation of their language. Kids today need both worlds, he explained, breaking off a piece of Maria's fresh-baked bread, the old and the new. Roots and wings. Maria nodded her agreement, and Emma noticed how the older woman seemed more animated in her nephew's presence, as if his vitality awakened something in her that had long been dormant. After the meal, as darkness settled over the desert, Thomas's expression grew more serious. He glanced at Emma, then addressed Maria in Apache. They spoke for several minutes, their tones low and measured. Emma watched their faces, trying to decipher the conversation from their expressions. Maria's brow furrowed at one point, and she shook her head firmly. Finally, Thomas turned to Emma. "I need to ask you something important," he said, "and I need you to understand that you're safe, no matter what your answer is." Emma tensed but nodded for him to continue. "Were you in danger at your foster home? Physical danger, I mean. Were you being harmed?" The question hung in the air, direct and unavoidable. Emma's throat tightened. She thought of Mr. Peterson's increasingly frequent drinking, the way his eyes followed her, how he had begun to check on her at night after Mrs. Peterson took her sleeping pills. Nothing had happened, not yet, but she had felt the threat like a shadow growing longer as the sun descended. "Not exactly," she said carefully, "but I think maybe I would have been soon." Thomas nodded, his expression grave but not surprised. "That's what I thought." He exchanged a look with Maria. "The situation is complicated. Legally, you're a ward of the state. You've been reported missing, and there's an active search for you." Emma's heart began to race. "Are you going to tell them I'm here?" "No," Thomas said firmly. "But we need to be realistic. This isn't a long-term solution. Eventually, someone will find you, or Maria could face legal troubles for harboring you." "Then I'll leave," Emma said, her voice small but determined. "I don't want Maria to get in trouble because of me." Maria made a sound of disapproval, the first time Emma had heard anything like anger from her. "No," she said, the single word carrying the weight of a mountain. "You stay." Thomas held up a hand in a calming gesture. "And no one's saying Emma has to leave right now, but we need a plan." He turned to Emma again. "Did you ever report your concerns about your foster father?" Emma shook her head. "Who would believe me? Nothing actually happened." "I believe you," Thomas said simply. "And there are others who would too. I have a friend who works for tribal social services. She might be able to help us navigate this situation, find a legal way for you to stay on the reservation, maybe even with Maria, if that's what you both want." The suggestion sent a surge of hope through Emma, so powerful that she felt lightheaded. Stay with Maria. Legally, permanently. It seemed too good to be true. "Can that really happen?" she asked, afraid to believe it possible. It's complicated, Thomas admitted. Yeah, there are jurisdictional issues between state and tribal authorities, and because you're not native, there are additional hurdles, but it's not impossible. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone, black with veins of white quartz running through it. He placed it on the table in front of Emma. "This is obsidian," he explained, "volcanic glass. Our people have used it for thousands of years, for tools, for ceremonial purposes, for protection." He smiled gently. "It absorbs negative energy and transforms it, turns darkness into something useful." Emma picked up the stone, feeling its cool weight in her palm. "Keep it with you," Thomas said, "as a reminder that difficult situations can be transformed. And that you have friends here, even ones you haven't met yet." After Thomas left, promising to return in a few days with more information, Emma and Maria sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear desert sky. The obsidian stone was in Emma's pocket, and she found herself touching it occasionally, drawing comfort from its smooth surface. "Do you think it could work?" she asked finally. What Thomas said. "About me staying here?" Maria was quiet for a long moment, her profile etched against the darkening sky like a figure carved from ancient wood. "The white man's law is like river," she said finally. "It follows its own path. Sometimes you can divert it, but it is powerful." She turned to look at Emma, her eyes reflecting the first evening stars. "But Thomas is smart, knows both worlds. If anyone can find a way, he will." "And do you want me to stay?" Emma asked, the question she had been holding inside finally escaping. "For good, I mean." Maria reached out slowly and placed her weathered hand over Emma's smaller one. The touch was light but steady, a bridge between their separate solitudes. "When Sarah and Lily died," she said, her voice low but clear, "part of me died too. Words left. Joy left. I walked in Shadowland." She squeezed Emma's hand gently. "Then you came, asked for soup, reminded me that life continues, even after great loss." Emma felt tears gathering behind her eyes but blinked them back. "I didn't do anything special," she whispered. "You were brave," Maria corrected. "You were honest. You were yourself." She released Emma's hand and looked back to the stars. "Yes, I want you to stay. But more important, what do you want?" The question caught Emma off guard. In foster care, what she wanted had rarely been a consideration. Placements were determined by availability, by the system's needs, by adults making decisions about her life without consulting her. To be asked directly what she wanted felt like being handed a gift she wasn't sure she knew how to open. "I want to stay with you," she said finally, the words carrying all the certainty her 8 years of life could muster. "I want to learn about plants and bees and everything you know. I want—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "I want this to be home." Maria nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement and commitment. "Then we will make it so." The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of unfamiliar voices outside the cabin. She slipped from her bed. She had graduated from the couch to a small cot in the corner of the main room and moved cautiously to the window. Through the glass, she could see Maria speaking with 2 women in the yard. One was elderly, perhaps even older than Maria, with white hair braided and wrapped in a traditional style. The other was middle-aged, wearing jeans and a turquoise blouse, her long hair loose around her shoulders. Maria's posture was relaxed, and she was speaking more than Emma had ever heard her speak at one time, her hands occasionally moving to emphasize a point. The older woman nodded frequently, while the younger one appeared to be asking questions. Emma retreated from the window, uncertain whether to make her presence known or remain hidden. Before she could decide, the cabin door opened and Maria entered, looking for her. "Emma," she said. "You come meet friends." Emma hesitated, glancing down at her rumpled clothes and bare feet. "It's okay," Maria assured her. "They are here to help." Taking a deep breath, Emma followed Maria outside. The morning sun was still gentle, not yet reaching its full strength, and the air smelled of sage and pine. "This is Emma," Maria said to the women, then turned to Emma. "This is Grandmother Alice White Mountain," she indicated the elderly woman, who regarded Emma with sharp, intelligent eyes, "and Denise Running Deer." The younger woman smiled warmly. "Thomas called me last night," Denise explained. "I work with tribal social services. He told me a little about your situation." Emma tensed, but Denise's kind expression didn't waver. "You're not in trouble," she assured Emma, "and neither is Maria. We're here to help figure out the best path forward. Grandmother Alice is our tribal elder," Maria added. "She has come to give blessing to our efforts." The elderly woman stepped forward and, without warning, placed her hands on either side of Emma's face. Her touch was gentle but firm, and her dark eyes seemed to look straight through Emma to something beyond. She spoke in Apache, her voice surprisingly strong. "She says your spirit is old," Maria translated, "that you have survived much darkness but still carry light." Grandmother Alice released Emma's face and stepped back, nodding once as if confirming something to herself. She spoke again, this time directly to Maria. "She says the circle is being restored," Maria translated, and for the first time since Emma had known her, there was a tremor in the older woman's voice. "That what was broken is finding new wholeness." Emma didn't fully understand the meaning of these words, but she felt their impact in the way Maria's shoulders straightened, in the new light that seemed to enter her eyes. In that moment, standing in the early morning sunlight with 3 Apache women who had no reason to help her but were choosing to do so anyway, Emma felt something shift inside her, like a door long closed beginning, tentatively, to open. Over the next few weeks, Emma's life settled into a rhythm so different from anything she had known before that sometimes she wondered if she had stepped into someone else's story. Mornings began with helping Maria tend the garden and prepare breakfast. Afternoons were for lessons, both the traditional education that Thomas arranged through a homeschooling program and Maria's teachings about plants, weather patterns, and Apache history. Denise visited regularly, sometimes bringing paperwork for Maria to sign, other times just checking in on their progress. She explained to Emma, in terms an 8-year-old could understand, the complex legal dance they were performing. "It's like crossing a river on stepping stones," Denise said one afternoon as they sat at Maria's table, a stack of documents between them. "We have to be careful where we place each foot." The first stone had been an emergency order from the tribal court, granting Maria temporary custody while they investigated Emma's claims about the Petersons. Thomas had helped Emma write a detailed statement, gently drawing out the concerning behaviors she had witnessed and experienced. Reading it over after she finished, Emma had been surprised by how different her experiences looked on paper, how clearly wrong they seemed when laid out in black and white. "Will they believe me?" she had asked Thomas. "Your words carry weight," he had assured her. "No, and we have people who will stand with you." The second stepping stone was a petition to have Emma's case transferred from state jurisdiction to tribal court, a complex legal maneuver that Denise described as creative but defensible. "Because you were found on reservation land and because Maria has taken you in, we can make a case that your welfare is a tribal concern," she explained. Emma understood little of the legal terminology, but she grasped the essential truth. People were fighting for her. Not just Maria and Thomas, but Denise, grandmother Alice, and others in the tribal community who had come to know her story. It was a foreign feeling, being deemed worthy of such effort, and Emma held it carefully, like a small flame that might be extinguished by too much hope. Maria seemed to sense her uncertainty. One evening, as they prepared herbs for drying, hanging bundles of sage and rosemary from the ceiling beams, she spoke of patience. "Nature does not hurry," she said, her fingers deftly tying a string around a bundle of lavender. "But everything is accomplished." Emma concentrated on her own bundle, trying to mimic Maria's precise movements. "But what if it doesn't work? What if they make me go back?" Maria's hands stilled. She regarded Emma with steady eyes. "Then we begin again. Find another path." She resumed her work, adding, "But I do not think this will happen. The spirits have brought us together for purpose." Emma wasn't sure about spirits, but she had come to believe in Maria's certainty. There was something unshakable about the older woman, a rootedness that seemed to extend deep into the earth beneath them. As September gave way to October, the desert air grew cooler, especially at night. Maria taught Emma how to bank the fire properly before bed so that embers would remain until morning. She showed her how to identify which wood burned cleanest, which provided the most heat, which created the most light. "Every tree gives different gift," she explained as they collected fallen branches one afternoon. "Or like people. What's my gift?" Emma asked, half joking, half serious. Maria considered this question with the same gravity she brought to all of Emma's inquiries, no matter how seemingly trivial. "You bring new eyes," she said finally. "You see things I had forgotten to notice. This is great gift." The simple assessment, delivered without fanfare but with absolute conviction, lodged in Emma's heart like a seed finding fertile soil. In mid-October, Thomas arrived with unexpected news. The Petersons had withdrawn their foster care license. Mr. Peterson had entered a rehabilitation program for alcoholism, and Mrs. Peterson had decided not to continue fostering without her husband's support. "What does that mean for me?" Emma asked, trying to interpret the adult's expressions. "It means one obstacle is removed," Thomas explained. "They're not fighting to have you return to them." It should have been entirely good news, but Emma felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also a strange, unexpected pang of rejection. Even though she had run away, even though the Petersons had been far from ideal guardians, some small part of her had wondered if they would fight to get her back, if they had cared for her at all. Maria, perceptive as always, placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "People can only give what they have inside," she said softly. "Their emptiness is not your failing." That night, unable to sleep, Emma slipped outside to sit on the porch steps. The desert night was clear and cold, the stars scattered across the black sky like diamonds on velvet. She wrapped herself in one of Maria's blankets and tried to sort through her confusion. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't hear Maria until the older woman settled beside her on the step, her own blanket drawn around her shoulders. "Big thoughts for small hour," Maria observed. Emma nodded. "I was thinking about the Petersons and my mom, and..." She hesitated. "I was wondering why nobody wants to keep me." The words emerged more vulnerable than she had intended, and she immediately wished she could take them back. But Maria didn't seem disturbed by her rawness. "Some people cannot see treasure even when they hold it," she said. "This is their blindness, not your worth." She pointed to the sky, where the Milky Way stretched like a luminous road. "Our ancestors believed that path of stars is road of spirits, every light a soul." She turned to Emma, her face silver in the starlight. Some shine bright for all to see, others you must look carefully to find. But all have place, all have purpose. Emma followed Maria's gaze upward, trying to see the sky through her eyes, not just as distant beauty, but as a map of meaning, a tapestry of connection. "I want to stay here," she whispered, "with you." Maria's arm came around her shoulders, a rare physical gesture from the normally reserved woman. "Then this is where you belong." The next day brought both progress and complication. Denise arrived with a tribal social worker named Ben, who interviewed Emma for nearly 2 hours, asking gentle but thorough questions about her life before and after coming to Maria's cabin. His kind eyes and patient manner made the process less intimidating than Emma had feared, but she was still exhausted by the end. Afterward, as Ben conferred with Denise and Maria in the yard, Emma sat on her cot, hugging her knees to her chest. Through the window, she could see their serious expressions, the way Denise kept shaking her head while Ben gestured emphatically. When they came inside, Emma could tell from their faces that something had changed. "Emma," Denise said, sitting beside her on the cot, "Ben has some concerns about your situation here." Emma's heart began to pound. What concerns? Ben knelt in front of her, his expression kind but serious. "Maria's home is wonderful in many ways," he said, "but it lacks some things that state inspectors would consider essential for a foster placement: running water inside the house, a modern heating system, regular access to health care, and formal education." "But I don't need those things," Emma protested. "I'm learning more here than I ever did in school, and Maria takes care of me better than anyone ever has." "I believe you," Ben said gently. "But my job is to make sure that any placement meets certain standards. Otherwise, the state could overrule the tribal court and remove you." Emma looked desperately to Maria, who stood near the fireplace, her face composed but her eyes troubled. "What does this mean?" Emma asked, her voice small. Denise took her hand. "It means we need to make some changes to strengthen our case. Thomas has offered to help install a proper water line to bring the plumbing inside, and we need to formalize your education plan. But I can stay while these changes are happening." Ben and Denise exchanged glances. "For now," Ben said, "but I have to file my report, and it will include these concerns. I'll recommend continued placement with Maria pending improvements, but ultimately the judge will decide." After they left, Emma helped Maria prepare dinner, both of them working in silence, the weight of uncertainty heavy between them. As they chopped vegetables for stew, Emma noticed that Maria's hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly. "Are you okay?" Emma asked. Maria nodded, but her eyes remained troubled. "Change comes," she said. "Always, whether we invite it or not." Emma set down her knife. "I'm sorry. This is all because of me." Maria looked at her sharply. "No, do not carry blame that is not yours." She wiped her hands on her apron and faced Emma directly. "Long ago, I chose to live apart, to step away from modern world. This was my right." Her voice softened. "But now, I choose you. This means accepting some changes, but your way of life, my way of life has already changed," Maria interrupted gently. "From the moment you knocked on my door. And this change," she placed a hand over her heart, "this change has been good." The simple declaration filled Emma with a warmth that pushed back against the cold fear that had gripped her since Ben's visit. If Maria, who had lived nearly 7 decades, who had lost so much, who had chosen solitude until Emma arrived, could embrace change with such grace, then perhaps Emma could find the courage to face whatever came next. That night, as they sat by the fire, Maria began to sing softly, a melody Emma had never heard before, with words in Apache that rose and fell like the contours of the land around them. Her voice was surprisingly clear and strong, as if the music had been waiting inside her all this time, preserved despite her years of silence. Emma listened, transfixed, as the song filled the small cabin. When Maria finished, the last note seemed to linger in the air, vibrating with something ancient and true. "What was that?" Emma asked, her voice hushed. "Sunrise Song," Maria replied. For new beginnings. The transformation of Maria's cabin began on a crisp Saturday morning in late October. Thomas arrived with his truck loaded with supplies, pipes, tools, lumber, and accompanied by 4 men from the reservation, each with skills to contribute. 2 were plumbers, 1 an electrician, and 1 a general contractor who had worked on projects throughout the Southwest. Emma watched with a mixture of excitement and anxiety as the men unloaded their equipment and conferred with Maria about the planned improvements. She felt responsible for this disruption of Maria's carefully ordered life, yet also grateful for the community that had rallied around them. "We'll start with the waterline," Thomas explained to Emma as the men began marking areas to dig, "then work on bringing proper electricity to replace the generator. By the time we're done, this place will meet every requirement on Ben's list." Maria stood slightly apart, observing the activity with an inscrutable expression. When one of the workers asked where she wanted the indoor bathroom to be placed, she hesitated only briefly before pointing to a corner of the cabin that currently housed her herb drying racks. "The herbs can hang elsewhere," she said, her voice steady despite the concession Emma knew this represented. Over the next 2 weeks, the cabin became a construction zone. Walls were opened to run pipes and wiring. A proper bathroom took shape, complete with a clawfoot tub that Thomas had salvaged from a renovation project in town. A more efficient wood stove was installed, supplemented by electric baseboard heating for the coldest winter nights. Throughout the process, Maria adapted with a grace that amazed Emma. The older woman worked alongside the men when they would allow it, learning how the new systems functioned, asking questions that revealed her sharp intelligence and practical nature. At night, when they were alone again, she would sit quietly by the fire, sometimes singing softly in Apache, sometimes simply watching the flames dance. "Are you sad?" Emma asked one evening, after a particularly disruptive day that had left sawdust coating every surface of their home. "About all these changes?" Maria considered the question with her usual thoughtfulness. "Change is neither good nor bad," she said finally. "It simply is, like winter after fall. What matters is how we meet it." She reached for a small leather pouch that hung on the wall, one of the few decorations in the cabin. From it, she withdrew a faded photograph and handed it to Emma. In the image, a younger Maria stood beside a woman who shared her high cheekbones and direct gaze. Sarah, Emma realized. Between them was a small girl with a wide smile and bright eyes, her hair in 2 braids tied with colorful ribbons. "Lily," Maria said softly, 7 years old. "Like spring rain." Emma handled the photograph carefully, aware of the precious nature of this glimpse into Maria's past, into the family she had lost. "She's beautiful," Emma said. Maria nodded. She loved school, books, learning. A small smile touched her lips, and she talked always, questions without end. Emma looked up from the photograph. "Like me?" "Yes," Maria agreed. "Like you." Always wanting to know why, how, when. She took the photograph back, her weathered fingers tracing the outlines of the faces before returning it to its pouch. "After they died," she continued, her voice low but steady, "I thought Hart would stop too. When it didn't, I was angry, wanted to follow them." She looked around the cabin, at the half-finished walls and exposed beams. "I came here to wait for death." Emma felt a chill despite the warmth of the fire, but death didn't come. "No," Maria agreed. "Instead, life continued. Seasons changed, plants grew, bees made honey. And she sighed. "I wrapped silence around me like blanket, hid from life." She reached out and touched Emma's cheek lightly, a gesture of such tenderness that Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Then you came. Asked for soup." Maria's eyes were dark and deep, reflecting firelight. "And I remembered what grandmother taught me. That Great Spirit sends us what we need, not always what we think we want." The words settled over Emma like a blessing, like the answer to a question she hadn't known how to ask. She had spent so much of her young life feeling unwanted, a burden to be shifted from one reluctant caretaker to another. To think that she might be exactly where she was meant to be, that she might be a gift rather than an obligation, the possibility was almost too beautiful to believe. As November arrived, bringing shorter days and a sharper chill to the desert air, the improvements to the cabin were nearly complete. Inside, the space was transformed. Running water, electric lights, a proper bathroom, and a small electric refrigerator complemented the wood stove and traditional elements that gave the home its character. Thomas and Denise had also arranged for a teacher from the reservation school to visit 3 times a week, providing formal instruction to supplement Maria's teachings. Mrs. Yazzie was young and energetic, with a modern approach balanced by deep respect for traditional knowledge. She quickly recognized Emma's intelligence and love of reading, bringing books that challenged and engaged her eager mind. "Emma has a natural aptitude for science," Miss Yazzie told Maria after their 3rd session. "She asks questions that most kids her age wouldn't think of." Maria nodded, unsurprised. "She sees patterns, connections." A hint of pride colored her voice. "Important for healer." Emma, overhearing this exchange, felt a warm glow of pleasure at both the praise and the implication that Maria saw her as a potential healer, someone who might carry forward the knowledge of plants and their uses that was so central to the older woman's life. The court date was set for November 15th, just 2 weeks away. As the day approached, a tension settled over the cabin that not even the most diligent preparations could dispel. Emma began having trouble sleeping, waking from dreams where faceless officials tore her away from Maria's home while the older woman watched in silence, unable to speak again. After one such nightmare left her gasping and tearful, Emma crept from her cot to Maria's bedroom door. She hesitated, hand raised to knock, suddenly afraid of seeming childish or demanding. Before she could retreat, the door opened. Maria stood there, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes alert despite the late hour. "Bad dreams," she said, not a question. Emma nodded, wiping at her damp cheeks with the back of her hand. Maria stepped aside, making space in the doorway. "And come." Emma followed her into the bedroom, a simple space with a narrow bed, a small dresser, and shelves lined with books and small carved figures that Emma recognized as traditional Apache Kachina dolls. Maria sat on the edge of the bed and patted the space beside her. "Dreams have power," she said as Emma settled next to her. "They speak truth we cannot see when awake." "My dream was about the court," Emma admitted. "About them taking me away." Maria nodded, unsurprised. "Fear speaks loudest at night. What if they don't let me stay? What if..." Emma's voice caught on a sob that she tried to swallow back. Maria put an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "Listen," she said. "In our tradition, when child has nightmare, we make dream catcher. Weave web that catches bad dreams, lets good ones through." She rose and went to a small wooden chest in the corner of the room. From it, she withdrew a hoop of bent willow, a spool of sinew thread, and a collection of beads and feathers. Returning to the bed, she showed Emma how to wrap the hoop with leather, then begin weaving the intricate web that formed the center of the dream catcher. As they worked together, Maria spoke softly of the meaning behind each element, the circle representing the sun's path, the web filtering dreams, the feathers providing dreams with a path to travel. But most important, she said as they tied the final knot, is intention, the love put into making it. The completed dream catcher was simple but beautiful, the web pattern intricate, adorned with 3 small white feathers and beads of turquoise and bone. "Hang above your bed," Maria instructed. "Let it catch fears before they reach you." Emma held the dream catcher carefully, touched beyond words by this tangible expression of Maria's care. "Thank you," she whispered. Maria brushed a strand of hair from Emma's forehead, her touch gentle. "Now sleep. Morning comes early." The night before the court date, the cabin filled with visitors. Thomas came, bringing Denise, Ben, and grandmother Alice. They gathered around Maria's table, reviewing their strategy one final time. Emma sat quietly in the corner, listening as the adults discussed legal precedents, witness testimonies, and the improvements made to the cabin. "The state's attorney will argue that Emma belongs in a more conventional foster setting," Denise explained. "One with 2 parents, in an urban area with easy access to schools and activities. But we have evidence that Emma is thriving here," Thomas countered. "Her test scores from Ms. Yazzi's assessments show she's working above grade level, and Ben's latest report documents her emotional growth and stability." Ben nodded in agreement. "She's a different child from the one I first interviewed. More confident, more open." Grandmother Alice, who had been silent until now, spoke in Apache. The adults all turned to her with expressions of respect. "Grandmother says the judge must see with heart, not just with eyes," Maria translated. "That some healing cannot be measured by white man's standards." As the meeting concluded and the visitors prepared to leave, Ben knelt beside Emma's chair. "Tomorrow will be challenging," he said honestly. The judge will ask you questions. You might see people from your past, maybe even the Petersons, though that's unlikely. Are you ready for that?" Emma swallowed hard. The thought of facing a courtroom full of strangers, of having to explain why she wanted to stay with Maria, made her stomach knot with anxiety. But she thought of the dream catcher now hanging above her bed, of Maria's quiet strength, of all the people who had worked so hard to make this possible. "I'm ready," she said, and was surprised to find she meant it. After everyone had gone, Emma helped Maria clean up the dishes from the meeting. They worked in companionable silence, the routine familiar and comforting. As Emma dried the last plate, she asked the question that had been pressing on her mind all evening. What if the judge says no? Maria set down the towel she was using to wipe the table. Her face was calm, but her eyes held a fierce light that Emma had rarely seen. "Then we appeal," she said simply. "We fight, we do not give up." "But what if—" "Emma." Maria's voice was gentle but firm. "Whatever happens tomorrow, one thing will not change. You belong here, with me. This truth is not decided by courts." She reached into her pocket and withdrew something small that gleamed in the lamplight. A silver pin shaped like a feather, intricately etched with a pattern that echoed the dream catcher they had made together. "This was Sarah's," Maria said, placing it in Emma's palm, given to her by her grandmother. Now it is yours." Emma stared at the pin, overwhelmed by its significance. "And I can't." "You can," Maria interrupted. "You will. Wear it tomorrow. Remember who stands with you." Emma closed her fingers around the pin, feeling its solid weight, the connection it represented to Sarah, to Lily, to the family Maria had lost, and the one they were building together. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Maria agreed. "And fear is natural when something matters deeply." She gently turned Emma to face her, looking directly into her eyes. "But remember what I taught you about sage, how it grows stronger after fire passes through. Some strength only comes from facing what frightens us." Outside, the desert night was alive with sounds, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of wind through juniper, the eternal conversation between earth and sky. Inside, two souls who had found each other across divides of age, culture, and circumstance, prepared for the battle that would determine their future together. Emma tucked the silver feather pin carefully into the pocket of the new dress Thomas had brought for court. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, but tonight, in this moment, she was home. The tribal courthouse stood on a rise at the center of the reservation, a modern building of sand-colored stone and glass that somehow managed to blend with the desert landscape while still conveying an air of authority. As Thomas's truck pulled into the parking lot, Emma clutched the silver feather pin attached to her new dress, its weight against her chest both comforting and nerve-wracking. Maria sat beside her in the back seat, dressed in her finest clothes, a traditional skirt and blouse embroidered with intricate patterns, her silver hair braided and wrapped in a style that Emma had never seen before. She looked regal, dignified, and utterly determined. "Remember," Denise said from the front passenger seat, turning to face them, "Judge Begay is fair but formal. Answer his questions directly." "Tell the truth always." Emma nodded, her throat too dry for words. She had rehearsed what she wanted to say, practiced with Thomas playing the role of judge, but now that the moment had arrived, all her careful preparation seemed inadequate. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than Emma had expected from television, but no less intimidating. Wooden benches lined the back half, while the front was dominated by a raised dais where the judge would sit. The tribal seal hung on the wall behind it, an eagle with outstretched wings, surrounded by sacred symbols. People were already gathering, Grandmother Alice and several elders from the tribe, Ben with his folder of reports, Ms. Yazzie clutching a binder of Emma's schoolwork. But there were also unfamiliar faces, a severe-looking woman in a suit who Denise identified as the state's attorney, and to Emma's shock, Mrs. Peterson, sitting stiffly near the back, her face drawn and uncomfortable. "What is she doing here?" Emma whispered to Thomas, panic rising in her chest. "She's been called as a witness," he explained quietly. "Don't worry. We anticipated this." Before Emma could process this information, a door at the front of the room opened, and everyone rose as Judge Begay entered. A tall man with silver-streaked black hair and a face that seemed carved from the same stone as the mountains beyond the reservation. The proceedings began with formalities that Emma barely followed, her attention divided between the judge's solemn presence and Mrs. Peterson's rigid posture, 3 rows behind her. Maria remained beside her, a steady anchor in the swirling current of legal terminology and procedural statements. Then, suddenly, Emma heard her name. "The court calls Emma Miller to speak," Judge Begay announced, his deep voice filling the room. Thomas gave her an encouraging nod, and Maria squeezed her hand once before releasing it. On shaky legs, Emma made her way to the small witness chair positioned before the judge's bench. Judge Begay looked down at her, his expression stern but not unkind. "Emma," he said, his voice gentler now, "I understand you're 8 years old. Do you know why we're here today?" Emma nodded, then remembered she was supposed to speak aloud. "Yes, sir. To decide if I can stay with Maria." "That's right, and I need to hear from you directly. Can you tell me why you want to stay with Mrs. Crow Feather?" Emma had prepared for this question, but now the carefully practiced words seemed inadequate. Instead, she found herself speaking from the heart. "Maria saw me," she said simply. "Not just looked at me, but really saw me. She didn't talk to anyone for 10 years after her daughter and granddaughter died, but she talked to me. She teaches me important things about plants and bees and how to live respectfully with the land. She makes me feel safe." Emma's voice grew stronger with each word. "Before Maria, I didn't belong anywhere. Now I do." Judge Begay's expression remained impassive, but his eyes were attentive. "I understand you ran away from your previous foster home. Can you tell me why?" Emma glanced at Mrs. Peterson, who was looking down at her hands. "I didn't feel safe there," she said carefully. "Mr. Peterson was drinking more and more, and the way he looked at me sometimes," she trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "No one listened when I tried to say something was wrong, so I left." "That was a dangerous decision for someone your age," the judge observed. "Yes, sir," Emma agreed. But staying felt more dangerous." The questioning continued, with the state's attorney pressing Emma about her education, about whether she missed having normal childhood experiences, about whether she understood that Maria was elderly and might not be able to care for her long term. Emma answered each question thoughtfully, occasionally glancing at Maria for reassurance. The older woman sat perfectly straight, her face composed, but her eyes never leaving Emma, a silent affirmation of her presence, her support. When the state's attorney called Mrs. Peterson to testify, Emma felt her stomach clench. Her former foster mother spoke stiffly about Emma's time in her home, describing her as withdrawn and difficult to connect with. But then, surprisingly, her voice softened. "And I wasn't in a position to give her what she needed," Mrs. Peterson admitted. "With my husband's issues and my own limitations, looking back, I can see why she left." She met Emma's eyes briefly. "I'm sorry, Emma. I should have protected you better." The simple apology, unexpected and seemingly sincere, loosened something in Emma's chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release of something she hadn't realized she was holding. Maria's testimony came next. She spoke clearly, her voice strong despite her years of silence, describing how Emma had arrived at her door and how their relationship had developed. When questioned about her ability to care for a child at her age, Maria's response was direct. "In our way, elders are teachers, wisdom keepers. My body is old, yes, but strong still. My mind is clear. And I am not alone." She gestured to the tribal members who filled the benches. "We raised children together as community." Judge Begay, himself Apache, nodded slightly at this, a cultural understanding passing between them that required no elaboration. After Thomas, Denise, Ben, and Miss Yazzie had each presented their testimonies and evidence, the judge called a brief recess. Emma sat with Maria in a small room adjacent to the courtroom, both of them quiet, the weight of anticipation heavy between them. "Whatever happens," Maria said finally, breaking the silence, "you spoke with courage, with truth. I am proud." Emma fingered the silver feather pin. "I'm trying to be like Sage," she said. "I'm strong after fire." A rare, full smile transformed Maria's face, softening the lines of age and hardship into curves of tenderness. "You are," she said simply. When they returned to the courtroom, Judge Begay's expression gave nothing away as he prepared to deliver his ruling. Emma held her breath, aware of Maria's steady presence beside her, of Thomas's reassuring nod from across the aisle, of the collective will of the community that had gathered to support them. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, Judge Begay began, his voice formal. "This court finds that the best interests of the minor, Emma Miller, are served by granting guardianship to Maria Crow Feather." A soft murmur ran through the courtroom. Emma felt a rush of disbelief, of joy so intense it was almost painful. She turned to Maria, who remained composed except for the brightness in her eyes. "However," the judge continued, and the room fell silent again, "this guardianship comes with conditions. Regular home visits by tribal social services will continue for 1 year. Emma's education will follow the approved plan developed with the reservation school. And Maria Crow Feather will participate in the tribe's elder health program to ensure her continued well-being." He looked directly at Emma, then, his formal demeanor softening slightly. "Young lady, you have shown remarkable resilience and wisdom beyond your years. I believe you and Miss Crow Feather have found in each other something rare and valuable. Honor that gift." With a final pound of his gavel, it was done. Emma was officially, legally, where she belonged. The next hours passed in a blur of congratulations, of handshakes and embraces from people Emma had come to know over the past weeks, and others she was meeting for the first time. Grandmother Alice pressed her weathered hands to Emma's cheeks and spoke a blessing in Apache. Ms. Yazzie promised to bring new books on herbology. Even Mrs. Peterson approached briefly, awkwardly, to wish Emma well before departing quickly. By the time they returned to the cabin, home, truly home now, the sun was setting, painting the desert in gold and crimson. Emma stepped from Thomas's truck and stood for a moment, taking in the familiar sight of the small building nestled among juniper and pine, smoke curling from the chimney where Denise had started a fire before joining them at court. Maria came to stand beside her, their shadows stretching long across the ground before them. "What happens now?" Emma asked softly. Maria considered this, her gaze taking in the land that had been her sanctuary, that would now be their shared home. "Now we live," she said simply. "We learn. We grow together." Inside the cabin, with its curious blend of traditional and modern, of Maria's past and their shared future, they settled into the familiar comfort of their evening routine. As darkness fell outside, Maria lit candles despite the new electric lights, preferring their warm, flickering glow. After dinner, as they sat by the fire, Maria rose and retrieved something from her bedroom, a book bound in soft leather, its pages yellowed with age. "This is Storybook," she explained, sitting beside Emma on the small sofa. "Apache legends, written by my grandmother, passed to my mother, to me, to Sarah." She ran her hand over the cover, then offered it to Emma. "And now to you." Emma accepted the book with reverence, understanding the profound trust this represented. "Will you read it to me?" she asked. "Teach me the stories." Maria nodded, a quiet joy in her eyes that Emma had never seen before tonight. "Yes, this is how knowledge continues. How we keep what matters." As Maria opened the book and began to read in her native language, translating each phrase into English afterward, Emma leaned against her side, content in a way she had never known possible. Outside, the desert night deepened, stars emerging one by one like silent witnesses to the miracle of two broken souls finding wholeness in each other. 1 year later, On the anniversary of the court decision, the cabin yard filled with people, tribal members, teachers from the reservation school, friends who had become like family. They gathered to celebrate what Grandmother Alice called the completing of the circle, Emma's formal adoption into the tribe, a rare honor for a non-native child that recognized the spiritual bond that had formed between her and Maria. Emma, now 9 and taller, stood beside Maria as Grandmother Alice led the ceremony, her silver feather pin gleaming against her dress. In the year that had passed, she had learned to speak basic Apache, to identify and use over 60 medicinal plants, to tend the beehives without fear. She attended school on the reservation 3 days a week, where her intelligence and curiosity had made her both an excellent student and, gradually, a friend to her classmates. Maria, too, had changed. She ventured into the community more often now, had begun teaching a class on traditional plant medicine at the cultural center, her voice growing stronger with each passing month. The silence that had claimed her for a decade was now merely a quality of her nature, a thoughtful pause before speaking, a comfort with stillness rather than a prison of grief. As the ceremony concluded, Thomas approached them, a camera in hand. "For the record," he said with a smile, "the official documentation of our miracle." Emma and Maria stood together before the cabin that had become their sanctuary and launching place. Maria's arm rested lightly around Emma's shoulders, and Emma leaned into the embrace, no longer afraid that it might be temporary, that she might be sent away. "Smile," Thomas instructed. But they were already smiling, not the bright, performative grins of posed photographs, but the quiet, profound expression of those who have found, against all odds, exactly where they belong. Later, after the guests had departed and the desert evening wrapped around their home like a familiar blanket, Emma and Maria sat on the porch steps, watching the stars emerge. "I've been thinking," Emma said, breaking a comfortable silence, "about that first day when I asked if I could clean your house for soup." Maria's eyes crinkled at the memory. "You were so small, so brave." "I was desperate," Emma corrected with a small laugh. "But also lucky. Of all the houses in the world, I knocked on yours." Maria looked at her, the love in her gaze as clear as the desert sky above them. "Perhaps not luck," she said softly. "Perhaps two hearts calling to each other across emptiness." Emma considered this, feeling the truth of it resonate deep within her. "Do you think Sarah and Lily know?" she asked. "About us?" Maria nodded, her face serene in the gathering darkness. "Yes." "They know. They celebrate." Emma reached for Maria's hand, their fingers intertwining, one small and growing, one weathered by time, but strong still. Between them flowed the understanding that had begun with a simple exchange, soup for cleaning, and had grown into something profound and enduring. A family forged not by blood, but by choice, by recognition, by the courage to begin again after loss. Above them, the Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light, the road of spirits that Maria had described on that night so long ago when Emma had doubted her place in the world. Now, gazing upward, Emma felt a certainty that had once seemed impossible, the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be, beside the woman who had broken a decade of silence to say 3 simple words that had changed everything. "You can stay."